There was one time I was on an aircraft and this guy was talking to me. He talked a lot. And I thought, wow, this guy's pretty chatty. He asked me what I do. I said, well, I'm a commercial pilot. So he said, oh, he said that he flew in World War II. And I said, oh. I said, well, my dad flew in World War II. And then he got very quiet. And he didn't say anything for about 15 minutes. And then he looked and he said, your dad flew in World War II. He says, that means your dad was a Tuskegee Airman. And I said, yes, he was. And he says, was he one of the Red Tails? And I said, yes. And then another 15 minutes went by. He said, would you do me a favor? And I said, probably. What's that? And he said, you know, things were different then than they are now. He said, but when we crossed the border, we didn't know who was going to pick us up. But we always wanted to see the Red Tails because the legend spread. He said, even while they were escorting us, he said, we called them trained apes and flying monkeys and made jokes. And he said, and those were the kind things that we said. He said, but I'm alive today, enjoying my grandkid, probably because of your father. So he gave me his card and said, please give this to him and tell him that I apologize for the things I said and did 60 years ago.
I am enclosing a study on the employment of Negro manpower in war.
Huge fleets of Allied bombers protected by umbrellas of fighter planes.
His mental inferiority and the inherent weaknesses of his character are factors that must be considered. His ideas with relation to honor are not on the same plane as those of our white population.
In 1925, there was a War College report that basically said that blacks were inferior to whites.
His fear of the unknown will prevent him from ever operating with success.
It recommended that because of the perception that they were inferior, that certain positions would not be afforded to them. And that's some of the racism that they had to contend with. The Army got its first airplane in 1909, but there were no black pilots in the American military until 1942, when the first ones graduated from advanced flight training at Tuskegee.
The Tuskegee Airmen literally changed America, but they also, more importantly, showed you that you can achieve anything that you set your mind to.
There were a lot of hurdles they had to overcome. One of them was the continuing perception among many in the War Department that they wouldn't be able to fly as effectively as their white counterparts. In fact, they drew personnel, African-American personnel from all over the country. So in a sense, they got the cream of the crop.
Growing up, I didn't really realize what his accomplishments were. You know, he was a father to me. The Tuskegee Airmen, you didn't really realize that he was a Tuskegee Airman because they didn't talk about it.
Charles McGee is one of the most famous of the Tuskegee Airmen. Not only was he one of the best pilots in the 302nd Fighter Group during World War II, but he stayed in the service. He flew fighters in Korea and fighters in Vietnam.
The Army had expected the program to fail because they had done in early studies didn't feel that blacks could do anything technical and perform successfully with whites. The 99th was combat ready in the same time that I started my training, the fall of 42, but no white commander wanted them. Colonel Momeyer didn't want them, so they didn't even go to the same base. They flew separately.
They flew so well, the 99th and then these other three squadrons of the 332nd Fighter Group, that General Acre, who was the head of the Mediterranean Allied Air Forces, decided they would have the opportunity to escort bombers. Those bombers had crews of at least 10 on each bomber, and to protect them, they needed fighters. There were 21 bomber groups in the 15th Air Force, but only 7 fighter groups to defend them.
Our leadership turned out to be a gentleman named Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. We respected B.O.'s leadership. He said, I'll court-martial the pilot that goes happy hunting.
Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. went to West Point, and he had a difficult time there, not because of anything he did, but because he was ostracized by the other cadets, ostracized by the faculty. They would not talk with him except on official business.
His policy was that our job was to protect American lives, and just because German aircraft are reported in the area, you will not go off, try to find them just to get a kill and become an ace. you will stick with the bombers, and that we did.
There were a lot of white bomber crews who owed their lives to escort pilots like the Tuskegee Airmen.
You got goggles on, you got an oxygen mask on. Many of the bomb crews did not know that the Red Tails were black pilots. Bombers were escorting, or their target was the nearby rail yards and the airfield. A group of folk tried to penetrate the bomb group we were escorting and made a turn that put him just right in my gun sights, and the plane crashed on the airfield.
There's very few people you can talk to or go someplace and they don't say, oh, I know some airmen, or they say, I know your father. And so it's amazing how many people actually do know them and are starting to understand what they had gone through.
The Pittsburgh Courier produced an article stating that we were fighting for a double victory. Our 477th Bomb Group played a critical part in that victory against racism here at home. Their commander, Colonel Selway, desired to keep segregation on the base where they were training, even though Army regulations said there should be no segregation. Officers of the 477th Bomb Group, peacefully in twos and threes, decided to enter the club. They, of course, were turned away, and Colonel Selway, unhappy, called the officers in and were immediately shipped off and put behind barbed wire guards and so on to wait trial. Later, President Harry Truman issued Executive Order 9981 mandating, all of the services need to integrate.
You caused America to look into the mirror of its soul. You showed America that there is nothing a black person couldn't do. There is nothing a human being cannot do if given a sense of purpose, if given the opportunity, if given the training, the skills, and if you believe in them.
We didn't enter it thinking about civil rights. We entered it as a citizen answering the draft or answering the call to participate in a war.
Even the Nazis asked why African-American men would fight for a country that treated them so unfairly.
They were able to shoot down 112 enemy aircraft. They were able to protect the bombers so well that they lost bombers on only 7 out of 179 bomber escort missions during World War II. And because of their record, because of their achievements, they proved that black officers given a chance could do at least as well as the white officer.
I would like to help atone for all the unreturned salutes and unforgivable indignities on behalf of the office I hold and a country that honors you. I salute you for the service to the United States of America.
Our experience dispelled the biases and generalizations and sometimes racist thoughts that said we weren't capable of doing a technical thing. And the focus at that time was, give me the opportunity.
I know that that's the quality of the person that my father and the other Tuskegee Airmen and what they accomplished and the lives that they changed and the movement that they started, not in the military, but in the U.S. It opened up so many other doors. I actually had a high school counselor that told my mother, maybe I could learn to drive a truck. I thought, drive a truck, what are you talking about? I'm gonna fly planes.
The Tuskegee Airmen weren't only the Red Tails, but the Red Tails were the most famous of the Tuskegee Airmen because they're the ones that became the visible face of the black officer during World War II. The Red Tail pilots showed that given the opportunity, African Americans could do as well as any white Americans.
It's not any one of us, but it's all of us together that make for a great future for our country.